What happens when one of comedy's most beloved figures gets ambushed on live television by a host who's supposed to be on his side? What you're about to witness is the moment Will Ferrell's famous composure completely shattered during what was meant to be a friendly chat on The Late Show. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral when egos clash and money gets involved. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because you're going to want to discuss what you think about Colbert's tactics after you see this unfold. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Will Ferrell settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. The comedian had been making his rounds promoting his latest project, and tonight's appearance was supposed to be the easy one, the friendly chat with a fellow comedian who understood the business. Ferrell adjusted his tie and smiled at the audience, that familiar goofy grin that had endeared him to millions. "Will Ferrell, everybody," Colbert announced, to thunderous applause. "Now, Will, you've been everywhere this week talking about your new movie. How are you holding up with this promotional marathon?" Ferrell leaned back in his chair, seeming relaxed. "You know, Stephen, it's part of the job. Though I have to say, some interviews have been more interesting than others. There was this one host in Chicago who kept asking me to do the anchorman voice for like 20 minutes straight." The audience chuckled, and Colbert smiled, but there was something different in his expression, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Speaking of interesting interviews, I actually have something fascinating to share with our audience tonight." He turned toward his desk and picked up a manila folder. "You see, Will, I've done some digging into your career lately, and I found some pretty compelling information." Ferrell's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the direction he'd expected the conversation to take. "Oh, really? What kind of information?" Colbert opened the folder with theatrical precision. "Well, let's start with your early days at Saturday Night Live. You know, back when you were just another cast member trying to make it big." His tone had shifted from friendly to something resembling a prosecutor presenting evidence. "I have here some financial records that show exactly how much you were making per episode back then." The studio audience grew quieter, sensing the shift in energy. Ferrell straightened in his chair, his media-trained instincts kicking in. "Stephen, I'm not sure where you're going with this, but my early career financials aren't really something I discuss publicly." "Oh, but they should be," Colbert continued, his voice gaining an edge, "because it paints a very interesting picture of how someone goes from making $800 per episode to commanding $20 million per movie. That's quite a leap, wouldn't you say?" Ferrell's jaw tightened. "Stephen, with all due respect, what does this have to do with my new movie? Isn't that why I'm here?" Colbert leaned forward, ignoring the question entirely. "But here's where it gets really interesting, Will. I also have records showing that during your time at SNL, there were several sketches that other cast members wrote that somehow ended up being performed by you instead. Sketches that became some of your most famous recurring characters." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ferrell's face was reddening, and his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "That's completely false, Stephen. Every sketch I performed was either written by me or assigned to me by the writers and producers. You're making some pretty serious allegations here." "Am I?" Colbert's tone was mock-innocent now. "Because I have testimony from 3 former SNL writers who tell a very different story. They say you had a habit of taking credit for collaborative work and pushing other performers out of sketches that were originally theirs." The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of cameras. Even the production crew seemed frozen. Ferrell stood up slightly in his chair, his voice rising. "Stephen, I don't know what game you're playing here, but you're way out of line. Those are lies, and you know it." Colbert held up a hand in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just presenting the information I've found. But let's move on to something even more interesting. He flipped to another page in his folder. Your movie contracts. Specifically, the one for Anchorman. Did you know that your co-stars were originally supposed to receive equal billing and equal pay? Ferrell was fully standing now, his famous comedic persona completely abandoned. What are you talking about? That movie was my project from day one. Was it, though? Colbert's smile was predatory now, because the original treatment I have here shows it was conceived as an ensemble piece. Steve Carell, Paul Rudd, David Koechner, they were all supposed to be equal partners. But somehow, by the time filming started, it had become the Will Ferrell show, with everyone else relegated to supporting roles and supporting salaries. That's enough, Ferrell said, his voice sharp and cutting through the studio silence. I don't know where you got this information or why you're choosing to ambush me with it on live television, but you're spreading lies about my career and my relationships with my colleagues. Colbert leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied with the chaos he'd created. Will, these aren't lies. These are documents, financial records, witness testimonies. I mean, if you want to dispute them, that's your right, but the evidence speaks for itself. The audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the light-hearted comedy show they'd come to see. This was something darker, more sinister. Ferrell looked around the studio, his eyes darting from the cameras to the audience to Colbert, as if trying to find an ally in a room full of strangers. You know what, Stephen? Ferrell's voice was controlled, but trembling with barely contained rage. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've worked with hundreds of people, and not once has anyone accused me of what you're suggesting tonight. So either you have some agenda I'm not aware of, or you're just trying to create controversy for your show ratings. Colbert's expression didn't change. My agenda is simple, Will. It's called journalism. It's called holding celebrities accountable for their actions. You've built an empire on this nice guy, goofy comedian image. But what if that's all just an act? What if behind the scenes, you're actually a ruthless businessman who steps on people to get ahead? Ferrell was pacing now, unable to sit still. This is insane. You invited me on your show to promote my movie, and instead, you're launching some kind of character assassination based on what documents you claim to have. Unnamed sources. This isn't journalism, Stephen. This is a hit job. Is it? Colbert turned to address the audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing something rare here tonight. You're seeing a celebrity's carefully constructed, public image cracking under the pressure of truth. Will Ferrell doesn't want to address these allegations because he knows they're accurate. That was the moment Ferrell truly lost it. Ferrell slammed his hand down on the armrest of his chair, the sound echoing through the stunned studio. You want the truth, Stephen? Here's the truth. You're a bitter, washed-up comedian who never made it to the level you thought you deserved. So now you get your kicks by tearing down people who actually succeeded. The audience gasped audibly. This was uncharted territory for late-night television. Colbert's eyebrows shot up, but his smug expression remained intact. Wow, Will, that's quite an accusation coming from someone who's been dodging my questions for the last 10 minutes. Dodging your questions? Ferrell laughed, but there was no humor in it. You haven't asked me a single legitimate question. Tonight, you've done nothing but make wild accusations based on what you claim are documents and sources that conveniently can't be verified on live television. Colbert held up the folder again, waving it slightly. These documents are very real, Will. Would you like me to read some specific names? Some specific dollar amounts? Because I have them right here. Go ahead, Ferrell shot back, his voice rising to a near shout. Read them. But when you do, I want you to also read the parts that show how those contracts were negotiated by teams of lawyers and agents, how every deal was approved by studio executives, and how every person involved signed off on their compensation knowing exactly what they were getting. For the first time since the ambush began, Colbert seemed slightly less confident. He flipped through the pages in his folder, buying time. Well, that's not really the point, is it? The point is the pattern of behavior. Pattern of behavior? Ferrell was incredulous now. You mean the pattern of working hard, being professional, and treating my colleagues with respect? Because that's the actual pattern, Stephen. Not whatever twisted narrative you've constructed to justify this circus. The studio's executive, producer was visible in the wings, frantically gesturing to his crew. This was spiraling beyond anything they could have anticipated. But the cameras kept rolling, and Colbert pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the damage he was causing. "Let's talk about your relationship with your Saturday Night Live castmates then," Colbert continued, his voice taking on that same prosecutorial tone. "I have quotes here from people who worked with you. Direct quotes about your behavior during table reads, during rehearsals, during filming." Ferrell took a step closer to Colbert's desk, his tall frame now looming over the host. "You know what? Stephen, I'm going to save you some time. Why don't you call Tina Fey right now? Or Amy Poehler? Or any of the people I actually worked with? Get them on the phone and ask them about my behavior, because unlike your mysterious, unnamed sources, they'll actually put their names behind their words." "That's not how this works, Will," Colbert replied, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "We're talking about your career, your choices, your impact on other people's lives and careers." "My impact?" Ferrell's voice cracked, with emotion. "Do you want to know about my impact? I've helped launch the careers of dozens of comedians. I've produced projects specifically to give other people opportunities. I've taken pay cuts on movies to make sure there was budget for better supporting casts. But none of that fits your narrative, does it?" Colbert leaned back in his chair, trying to regain his composure. "Will, you're getting very defensive about some pretty straightforward questions." "Straightforward questions?" Ferrell exploded. "Are you kidding me? You ambushed me on live television with unsubstantiated allegations about my character and career, and you think I'm being defensive? What did you expect, Stephen? Did you think I was just going to sit here and let you destroy my reputation for your entertainment?" The audience was completely silent now, watching this train wreck unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. Some people in the front rows looked genuinely uncomfortable, as if they wanted to leave but couldn't look away. Colbert shuffled his papers again, clearly trying to find his footing. "I expected you to address the allegations honestly instead of attacking me personally." "Attacking you personally?" Ferrell laughed bitterly. "You've spent the last 15 minutes attacking me personally with lies and half-truths, and now you're upset that I'm pushing back? That's rich, Stephen. That's really rich." "They're not lies, Will. I have documentation." "Show me the documentation, then," Ferrell demanded, reaching for the folder. "Let me see these mysterious documents you keep waving around." Colbert pulled the folder back, clutching it to his chest. "That's not how this works. This is my show, my interview." "Your interview?" Ferrell's voice rose to a shout again. "This isn't an interview, Stephen. This is a public execution disguised as entertainment. You've turned your show into a kangaroo court with yourself as judge, jury, and executioner." The host tried to regain control of the situation, turning toward the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Will Ferrell is having quite a strong reaction to some basic questions about his career trajectory." "Basic questions?" Ferrell whirled around to face the camera himself. "He's accusing me of stealing material from other writers, of cheating my co-stars out of money, of being a fraud and a liar. Those aren't basic questions, those are character assassinations." Colbert stood up from behind his desk, finally abandoning the pretense of a normal interview format. Will, I think you need to calm down. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene. Ferrell's voice hit a pitch that filled the entire studio. You invite me onto your show under false pretenses, ambush me with lies and allegations, and then tell me I'm making a scene when I defend myself. You're unbelievable, Stephen. You're absolutely unbelievable. The two men were now standing face to face, the height difference making Ferrell loom over Colbert. The tension in the studio was palpable, electric, dangerous. Production assistants were hovering near the edge of the set, clearly unsure whether they should intervene. Maybe we should take a commercial break, someone called out from the wings. No, Colbert said sharply, never taking his eyes off Ferrell. We're live. We're staying live. Will, I think our audience deserves to see the real you. Not the carefully managed public persona, but the real Will Ferrell when he's under pressure. The real me. Ferrell's voice was deadly quiet now, which somehow seemed more ominous than his shouting. You want to see the real me, Stephen? The real me is someone who's worked his entire career to bring joy and laughter to people. The real me is someone who shows up on time, knows his lines, treats everyone on set with respect, and tries to make the best product possible. But you don't want to hear about that, do you? Because that doesn't make for good television. Colbert's mask was finally slipping. The calculated smugness was being replaced by something uglier, more desperate. What makes for good television, Will, is honesty. And honestly, I think you've been lying to the public for years about who you really are. That accusation hit Ferrell like a physical blow. His face went completely red, and for a moment he seemed speechless. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking with rage. You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. This is good television, because everyone watching tonight is getting to see exactly who you really are, too. Colbert's face darkened at Ferrell's words. The veneer of television professionalism was completely gone now, replaced by raw anger. What's that supposed to mean, Will? It means, Ferrell said, his voice steady but filled with venom, that everyone watching can see you for what you really are. A failed comedian who couldn't make it on his own merit, so now you've become a parasite who feeds off destroying other people's reputations. The studio audience was dead silent. Several people in the front row had their hands over their mouths in shock. This was beyond anything anyone had ever seen on late-night television. Colbert stepped closer, invading Ferrell's personal space. You think you can come on my show and insult me? This is my house, Will. My show. My rules. Your rules? Ferrell laughed coldly. Your rules apparently include lying to guests about the nature of interviews, ambushing them with false accusations, and then acting like the victim when they fight back. Those are some interesting rules, Stephen. False accusations? Colbert held up his folder again, his hand shaking slightly with rage. Everything in here is documented. Every allegation is backed up by evidence. Then show it, Ferrell demanded, lunging forward and grabbing for the folder. Show everyone this so-called evidence. Colbert yanked the folder away, but in the Yaboku struggle, several papers scattered across the studio floor. As they fell, the audience could see what was really in that folder. Blank pages, empty documents, a few printed emails that looked like they'd been hastily created. Ferrell stared at the scattered papers, then looked up at Colbert with complete disgust. You've got to be kidding me. This whole thing, this entire ambush, it's all based on nothing? You made it all up. Colbert scrambled to collect the papers, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Those aren't… the real documents are. This is just what, Stephen? Ferrell's voice was deadly quiet again. This is just you deciding to destroy someone's reputation on live television for ratings. This is just you, thinking you could get away with it because I'm supposed to be the nice guy who won't fight back. The host abandoned trying to collect his fake evidence and stood up, facing Ferrell directly. You know what? Maybe I don't have ironclad documentation, but everyone in Hollywood knows the stories about you. Everyone knows you're not as nice as you pretend to be. Everyone knows? Ferrell stepped forward until he was inches from Colbert's face. Who's everyone, Stephen? Name one person. Give me one specific example of someone I've wronged. Just one. Colbert opened his mouth, then closed it. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I don't have to name anyone. The pattern speaks for itself. What pattern? Ferrell exploded again. The pattern of you making things up. The pattern of you being willing to lie on television to make yourself look important. That's the only pattern I see here. The executive producer was now standing at the edge of the set, frantically making cutting motions across his throat, but both men ignored him completely. You think you're untouchable, don't you? Colbert snarled. You think because you're America's comedy sweetheart, you can do whatever you want and nobody will call you out on it. Call me out on what? Ferrell roared. You still haven't told me what I supposedly did wrong. You've made vague accusations, waved around empty folders, and acted like you're some kind of investigative journalist when really you're just a talk show host with delusions of grandeur. Colbert's mask completely slipped then. You want to know what you did wrong, Will? You succeeded where I couldn't. You got the movie career I wanted. You got the respect I deserved. You got everything handed to you while people like me had to claw and scrape for every opportunity. The confession hung in the air, like a toxic cloud. Even Colbert seemed shocked that he'd said it out loud. Ferrell stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. There it is, Ferrell said quietly. The truth finally comes out. This isn't about justice or accountability or holding celebrities responsible. This is about jealousy. This is about you being bitter that your career didn't go the way you wanted it to. So you decided to take it out on me. Colbert tried to backtrack. That's not... I didn't mean... Oh, you meant it, Ferrell interrupted. You absolutely meant it. And you know what the really sad part is, Stephen? You actually had a good career. You were successful. You had this show. You had respect. You had a platform. But apparently, that wasn't enough for you. You had to try to tear someone else down to make yourself feel better. The host was visibly struggling now, his composure completely shattered. Will, I think we should just what? Pretend this didn't happen. Pretend you didn't. Just admit on live televisions that you ambushed me out of professional jealousy? Ferrell turned toward the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed something unprecedented. You saw a television host admit that he lied about a guest, made up allegations, and tried to destroy someone's reputation because he was envious of their success. Colbert made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Will, you're taking my words out of context. I'm taking your words exactly as you said them, Ferrell cut him off. And what you said was that you targeted me because I succeeded where you couldn't. That's not out of context, Stephen. That's just pathetic. The comedian walked back to his chair and picked up his jacket, clearly preparing to leave. You know what the irony is in all of this? If you had just done a normal interview tonight, if you had just been professional and decent, we probably would have had a great conversation. I might have even invited you to be in my next movie. But instead, you chose to reveal yourself as someone who's willing to lie and destroy others for personal satisfaction. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk, watching his career implode in real time. Will, please, let's just nothing, Ferrell said, putting on his jacket. I'm done here. And honestly, Stephen, after tonight, I think you should be done too. This show deserves better than a host who lies to guests and makes up stories for ratings. As Ferrell walked toward the exit, he turned back one final time. Oh, and Stephen? Next time you want to ambush someone on television, make sure your fake evidence folder actually has something in it. Amateur mistake from someone who claims to be a professional. The studio remained dead silent as Ferrell disappeared through the curtains. Colbert stood alone on his set, surrounded by scattered blank papers, facing an audience that had just watched him destroy his own credibility on live television. After what felt like an eternity, Colbert finally spoke to the camera, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll be right back after this commercial break." But as the cameras finally stopped rolling, everyone in that studio knew that Stephen Colbert would never really be back. Not after what they'd all just witnessed. So what do you think about Colbert's tactics? Was this jealousy-driven ambush justified? Or did he cross a line that should never be crossed in television? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe for more stories about what really happens when the cameras are rolling and celebrities drop their masks.